My stepsister made me the family scapegoat for 30 years. She lied about me having drug problems and almost destroyed my career as a lawyer. But I compiled evidence for 2 years and exposed her to the entire family with a 20-page document that left them speechless. I'm 40 years old. I'm a lawyer. I'm married and I have 2 daughters. And what I'm about to tell you sounds so absurd that if I hadn't lived it myself, I wouldn't believe it. Basically, I spent 30 years, 30 complete years of my life, being my family's scapegoat, thanks to my stepsister Heather, who is literally one of the most manipulative people I've ever met in my life. And that's saying something because I work in law where I've seen everything. The thing is that finally, like 2 years ago, I managed to expose her in front of the whole family, and my life changed completely. But getting to that point almost killed me. Literally. I ended up hospitalized and everything. I guess I should start from the beginning so this whole mess makes sense. My dad died when I was 6 years old. It was a car accident. Very sudden. And honestly, I don't remember much from that time except that my mom, Janet, was devastated. I was an only child at that point, and I remember my mom trying her best to stay strong for me, trying to move forward. When I was like 7 or 8, I think it was when I was 8 because I remember being in 3rd grade, my mom met Mark at work. He was also a widower, had 3 kids, 2 boys, David and Michael, and a girl my exact same age, Heather. At first, everything seemed normal. I mean, we were kids and we got along. Like we played together and stuff. And I was happy to have siblings because I'd been alone for a long time. But from the very beginning, looking back now at 40 with all the experience I have, I can see the signs that I didn't understand at the time. Heather had this incredible ability to present herself as the perfect child in front of adults, like all smiles and please and thank you and helping with everything. But when the adults weren't around, she was completely different. I remember perfectly this one time. We must have been like 9 years old. She broke my mom's vase playing in the living room when we weren't supposed to be there, and when my mom came home and asked what happened, Heather started crying and said I had pushed her, and that's why the vase fell. I tried to explain it wasn't true, but she was crying so convincingly that my mom punished me. That was the first time, but definitely not the last. Over time, things got worse, but in such a gradual way that it was hard to point out exactly what was wrong. You know what I mean? It was like living in this alternate reality, where I knew what was happening, but nobody else saw it. Mark, my stepdad, clearly favored his biological children, and my mom, honestly, just went along to keep the peace in the marriage. My stepbrothers, David and Michael, got allowances every week, had cell phones, when that was just starting to become common, like in the 2000s when I was in high school, could go out with their friends no problem. I didn't get any of that. Literally nothing. I had no allowance, no phone, and if I wanted to go anywhere with my friends, I had to go through an hour-long interrogation, and almost always the answer was no. Heather technically didn't get some of those things either, but the difference was she was very crafty. So she got what she wanted in other ways, like manipulating our parents or getting the brothers to give her money or whatever. And when I complained that the treatment was different, Heather would cry and say, I was attacking her because I was jealous that she was closer to our parents, and then I'd end up looking like the bad guy. It was exhausting. Seriously. Every day was a battle. And when college time came, I worked super hard in school because I knew it was my only way out of that house. I got a full scholarship to a decent university. It wasn't Harvard or anything, but it was good, and it was like 3 hours from home. My parents didn't give me a single cent for college. Nothing. Not for books or food or transportation. Absolutely nothing. I had to work full-time while studying to pay my expenses, and it was so hard. I mean, there were weeks where I literally ate ramen and pasta every single day because I didn't have money for more. I'd call my mom crying sometimes, asking for even just $50 to buy food, and she'd tell me they didn't have extra money to understand. Meanwhile, Heather decided to go to an expensive private university, like $40,000 a year or something like that. And my parents paid for everything. Absolutely everything. Her dorm, her food, her books. They even gave her extra money to go out on weekends. When I asked them why she got help, and I didn't, Mark told me I had chosen to go far away, and those were the consequences of my decisions. Heather had chosen a university even farther than mine, but apparently that didn't apply to her. The favoritism was so obvious it physically hurt, So I graduated from college, got into law school with another partial scholarship and more student loans, and still received no support from my family. By this point, I was like 22 and honestly had developed a pretty distant relationship with all of them. I'd see them at obligatory holidays like Christmas and Thanksgiving, but other than that, we didn't have much contact. During law school, I met Stephanie, my now wife, and she was the first person in my life who really saw me. You know what I mean? Who didn't buy into Heather's lies, who saw the pattern of manipulation, and who supported me unconditionally. When I was like 25, fresh out of law school and starting my first job as a junior attorney, there was an incident that basically cut off my relationship with my parents for a while. Turns out Mark lost his job, like he got fired or something. I don't remember the exact details. And the family went through a financial crisis. I, at that time, was earning minimum at my new job and still paying my student loans that were like $80,000 total, so I didn't have much extra money. I called my mom to ask how I could help and offered to send like $200 a month for a few months until Mark found a new job, which honestly was all I could give at the time. Apparently, Heather told everyone that I had refused to help the family in their time of need, that I had said it wasn't my problem and they should figure it out themselves. This was completely false. I never said anything like that, but she basically painted this story of me being this horrible, ungrateful person who had turned my back on the family when they needed me most. My brothers stopped talking to me. My mom left me voicemails crying, saying she couldn't believe I was so cruel, and Mark sent me an email telling me I was no longer welcome in his house. I tried to explain the truth, but nobody would listen. Heather had planted the seed, and everyone believed her because, she was the one who was always there, who visited them all the time, the perfect daughter. I was the one who had gone away to college, who was busy with my career. So it fit the narrative that I didn't care about them. I was basically no contact with my family for like 2 years after that, and honestly, it was a relief in a way not having to deal with all that drama. Things eventually calmed down a bit, like we started talking superficially again, but the relationship was never the same. By the time I was 30, I was already married to Stephanie. We had our first daughter, and I had built a life completely separate from my family of origin. I'd see them maybe 2 or 3 times a year, and that was it. Heather by then was also married and working in I don't know what, marketing or something. And from the outside, everything seemed fine between us, like we were cordial when we saw each other even though we weren't close. But then weird things started happening at my work. I, by that point, was no longer a junior attorney. I had been promoted and was at a medium-sized firm earning pretty well, and suddenly I started hearing rumors about me. Nothing specific at first, just weird. Comments from colleagues, some strange looks, that feeling that people are talking about you behind your back. Finally, a coworker I had a good relationship with pulled me aside and asked if it was true that I'd had substance abuse problems in college. I was like, "What? What are you talking about?" And she told me she'd heard from several people that I'd had serious problems with alcohol and drugs. Turns out Heather had found someone who worked at my firm. I don't remember exactly how they made the connection, but basically she had told this person a whole invented story about me, about how I had been an addict in college and had left law school temporarily to go to rehab, etc. None of that was true. Absolutely none of it. But the gossip had spread throughout the entire office. I had to sit down with my boss and explain the whole situation, show her my academic records, everything, to prove it wasn't true. It was humiliating and terrifying because I easily could have lost my job over those rumors. I sent Heather a message confronting her, and she acted like she had no idea what I was talking about. Like, "Oh no, I can't believe someone said that. How terrible. I would never say something like that about you." But I knew it had been her. I talked to my parents about this, and they basically told me to drop the drama, that Heather wouldn't do something like that it was probably a misunderstanding. Again, it was me against perfect Heather's word. What happened next was probably the worst of everything, and what finally led me to take serious action. When my oldest daughter was like 8 years old, there was a big family gathering. I think it was my mom's birthday or something, and Heather was there with her family. A few weeks after that gathering, my mom called me super upset and said she needed to talk to me about something very serious. She told me that Heather had come to talk to her and Mark, crying, saying she needed to tell them something that had been tormenting her for years. According to Heather, I had sexually abused her when we were children. She also said I had done the same to my stepbrothers. Basically, she was accusing me of having been a child abuser who had molested my siblings for years. When my mom told me this over the phone, I literally couldn't breathe. It was so absurd, so completely made up and horrible, that I couldn't even process that someone would say something like that, especially about something as serious as child abuse. I told my parents that none of that was true, that Heather was lying, but they had already believed her. They had already talked to David and Michael, and apparently Heather had convinced them that they had repressed these memories, and that's why they didn't remember them clearly, but that it had definitely happened. It was this terrible psychological manipulation where she basically implanted false memories in them. I tried to talk to my brothers directly, but they didn't want to talk to me. That night, after the call from my mom, I had a panic attack so severe that Stephanie had to take me to the emergency room. I couldn't breathe. I felt like I was going to die. And the doctors thought I was having a heart attack at first. They did all the tests and it turned out to be pure panic and extreme stress. They gave me anxiety medication and sent me home, but the following weeks were a nightmare. I couldn't sleep, couldn't eat. I constantly had this knot in my stomach thinking about my family believing I was a monster. Like 2 months after all this, I ended up in the hospital again, but this time it was acute pancreatitis caused by extreme stress. I was hospitalized for almost a week. The pain was unbearable, and the doctors told me if I continued like this, I was going to have serious and permanent health problems. It was in the hospital, talking with Stephanie and really facing what this situation was doing to me, that I decided I had to do something different. I couldn't keep trying to convince my family of the truth because they weren't going to listen. I needed another strategy. Stephanie, who is incredibly intelligent and never let herself be manipulated by Heather for even a second, helped me develop a plan. The idea was basically to give Heather enough rope to hang herself. You know what I mean? We knew she was a compulsive liar, that she needed attention and drama constantly, so we decided that the whole family was going to implement what we called the silent treatment strategy. I explained the plan to David and Michael first, without involving my parents, because I knew they would tell Heather. To my surprise, when I really talked in depth with my brothers about everything that had happened over the years, about Heather's pattern of lies, about how she had manipulated all of us, they started to see the inconsistencies. Michael especially told me he had always had this weird feeling about the accusations, that he had no real memory of anything Heather said had happened, only what she had told him he should remember. David admitted that Heather had asked him to say certain things about me to our parents over the years, things he knew weren't true but said them anyway because she would cry and say he was helping her. I convinced my brothers to participate in the plan. The strategy was simple but required discipline. We were all going to completely ignore Heather. No responding to her messages, no answering her calls, no engaging with her in any way. When we were at family events where she was present, we would be polite but cold and leave as soon as possible. Basically, we were going to treat her like she was invisible. We weren't going to give her any opportunity to create drama, no emotional reaction to feed off of. At first, it was super difficult because Heather escalated her attempts to get attention. She sent long emotional messages about how the family was falling apart, about how nobody loved her, about how she felt attacked. None of us responded. She called crying, leaving voicemails saying she needed help, that she was going through a crisis. Nobody responded. She tried to create situations where we'd be forced to interact with her, like showing up at places where she knew we'd be. We ignored her. Like 2 years passed of this. 2 years of completely ignoring her while she became increasingly desperate and erratic. My parents didn't understand what was happening. They thought all their children had gone crazy and were being cruel to Heather for no reason. But we didn't explain the plan to them because we knew they would defend her and ruin everything. During these 2 years, I worked with a therapist, processing all the trauma from years of emotional abuse and manipulation. I also started documenting absolutely everything. Screenshots of every message Heather sent, recordings of voicemails, everything. The breaking point came at Michael's wedding, like a year and a half ago. It was a big wedding, like 150 people, and obviously Heather was invited because she's the groom's sister. I went with Stephanie and our 2 daughters, and honestly, I didn't want to go, but it was important to Michael, so I made the effort. During the reception, after Heather had apparently had several glasses of wine, I saw her approach Stephanie at the bar. I was in the bathroom at that moment, so I didn't see exactly what happened. But when I came out, Stephanie was visibly upset. Turns out Heather told Stephanie she needed to warn her about something very important for the sake of our daughters. She told her I had abusive tendencies, that I had abused my siblings when we were kids, and that Stephanie needed to protect our daughters from me. She told her she felt it was her moral responsibility to make sure Stephanie knew the truth about who I really was. Basically, she tried to convince my wife that I was a danger to our own daughters. That was the last straw. Stephanie, who is normally super calm and controlled, was furious. She told Heather to stay away from her and our family, and then told me everything. That night when we got home, I sat down and wrote everything. Everything that had happened for 30 years, every lie, every manipulation, every time Heather had destroyed my reputation or my relationships. I organized all the messages I had saved, all the screenshots, all the emails, everything into one long document. I waited until the next day and created a group chat with my entire family, literally everyone, my parents, my brothers, my aunts and uncles, my cousins, everyone. And I shared the document. It was like 20 pages of detailed evidence showing Heather's pattern of behavior over decades. I included conversations where she sent me contradictory messages, where she admitted things she later denied, where she was clearly lying about events that other people could corroborate. I explained why my brothers and I had been ignoring her for 2 years, showed messages where she tried to manipulate us into responding messages where she changed her story depending on who she was talking to. I included the conversation she'd had with Stephanie at the wedding, with the exact details of what Heather had told her. And at the end of the document, I wrote something I thought I'd never write, basically giving my family an ultimatum, saying that if after seeing all this evidence they still chose to believe Heather over me, then I was going to distance myself permanently because I couldn't keep living like this. I sent the message like at 9 inches the morning on a Sunday, and then turned off my phone because I knew it was going to explode. When I turned it on like 4 hours later, I had literally over 200 notifications. The group chat was total chaos. Heather had written like 50 messages trying to defend herself, saying everything was a lie, that I had manipulated the screenshots, that I was making everything up because I was jealous of her. But the interesting thing is that other people in the family, especially my cousins and some aunts and uncles, started sharing their own experiences with Heather. My cousin Rebecca wrote about how Heather had made up that Rebecca had tried to seduce Heather's husband at a family party years ago, which almost destroyed Rebecca's marriage. My uncle Jim told how Heather had spread rumors that he had gambling problems and had borrowed money he never paid back, when none of that was true. Story after story started coming out, people sharing experiences where Heather had lied about them or manipulated them. It was like when I finally exposed the truth, everyone else felt safe to share their own experiences. The most shocking thing was when David wrote in the chat admitting that the abuse accusations had never been real, that Heather had pressured him to say he remembered things that never happened, and that he had gone along with it because he was afraid that if he didn't, she would make up things about him. 2. Michael wrote something similar, saying he felt terrible for having let the lies continue for so long. Heather tried for hours to control the damage, writing increasingly desperate and unhinged messages. At some point, she started insulting everyone, saying we were a horrible family, that everyone was against her, that we had betrayed her. Eventually, her husband entered the chat and wrote something brief, saying they were going to need space, and that Heather wasn't going to be in contact with the family for a while. After that, silence from her. Like 2 days later, I got a call from my mom. I answered expecting another fight, another time where I'd have to defend my truth. But when she started talking, she was crying. She told me, "Ashley, I'm so sorry I didn't believe you. Please forgive me." She told me that she and Mark had spent the last 48 hours really reviewing everything, talking with other family members, seeing the patterns I had pointed out, and that they could finally see what had been happening. She said she felt terrible for having let Mark favor his biological children, for not having defended me, for having chosen to believe Heather over me again and again. The call lasted like 2 hours. My mom was devastated, like really processing how much damage had been done over all those years. I don't know if we'll ever be able to completely repair the relationship, honestly, because there's a lot of pain there and a lot of lost time. But at least now the truth is out, you know? At least now, my family knows who I really am and who Heather really is. Heather has basically disappeared since then. She stopped going to family events, doesn't respond to anyone's messages, and from what I heard, her marriage is going through problems too, because apparently her husband is starting to see the pattern of lies in other areas of her life. Part of me feels something weird about that. I don't know if it's pity or what, because at the end of the day, she's clearly sick, like there's something psychologically wrong with someone who can lie so consistently for decades. But another part of me, the part that carried the weight of her lies for 30 years, simply feels free. Today, my relationship with my brothers is better than it's been in years. Maybe better than it ever was. We're rebuilding something real, without Heather's interference. My mom and I talk regularly now, although there are still awkward moments where neither of us knows exactly what to say. With Mark, the relationship is still tense and probably always will be, but at least now there's an acknowledgement that things weren't okay. My daughters ask sometimes about Aunt Heather, why they don't see her anymore, and we've told them in an age-appropriate way that sometimes adults have problems and need space to resolve them. Someday, when they're older, we'll tell them the full story, but for now they're protected from all that drama, which is exactly how it should be. The craziest thing about all part of this is that when I finally stopped trying to convince everyone and just presented the truth clearly and directly, everything changed. For years, I thought I had to keep fighting, keep explaining, keep defending myself. But in the end, what worked was simply presenting the facts and letting people decide what to believe. And knowing that my family now knows the truth, that they don't think I'm this horrible person Heather painted for decades, is a weight I didn't know how much I was carrying until it was gone. I don't know what's going to happen with Heather long term. I don't know if she'll ever get the professional help she clearly needs, or if she'll continue down this path of lies and manipulation in other areas of her life. Honestly, it's not my problem anymore. For the first time in my entire adult life, I can say I'm free from her influence, free from her lies, free from the constant anxiety of wondering what she's going to make up next. And that, after everything that happened, feels like a victory.